So back in the day, well, it was only silver service. There was no plated service that happened in restaurants. It was all about Garradon trolleys. It was all about flambe trolleys. It was all about traditional dishes. If anything, half the time the waiters actually went to the restaurant and cooked from their bizarre wooden style trolleys. It was a serious industry, very, very professional, very, very organised and very much revered. This wasn't messing around. This was a serious kind of place to be and to work in. There were a few chefs' books around, no television series, no cooking demonstrations, nothing that was at all frivolous. No joking apart from what the chefs really wanted to mess around with, but this was tough life. Working your birthday, working Christmas. This was about long hours, long days, continually, never moaning. It was about being some kind of hoop superhero. All the chefs had beards, which is very interesting, and all wore tall hats. It wasn't kind of the modern style of dress. You very much were frowned upon if you wore anything other than traditional kind of wares. And they always used to say there's only one thing worse than an English chef, and that's actually an American chef. So the pecking order was Germans and Swiss and French, and the English style of food was seen as being really bad. I think in those days I earned £10 a week. I think it went up to £11 after about 3 years. But it wasn't at all about earning fast money and doing things quick. It was about the longevity of the career and thinking about 10, 15, 20 years ahead, which in those days was quite important. I remember I think 40 odd people applied for my job. In those days there was a big demand to learn and understand trades, etc. Chef's skills were revered. People were in awe of you. It was all about the trade. There were no flash in the pan successes. You had to do your time. Few, if any, restaurants or food places were run by accountants, management companies or administrators. And recipes and menus were generally 85% French. It was all about tall hats and beards. Drinking was rampant in kitchens, wasn't at all frowned upon, it was all part of the work. And the food suppliers were only dictated by the chef. He decided which suppliers and how much you paid. It wasn't done by anybody else in the business typically. Dried herbs, no one ever saw any fresh ones. Customers generally, not because of the place I worked at when I was an apprentice, but generally ate out 3-4 times a year. It wasn't the kind of latest rock and roll thing. You went out as a very, very special occasions. No new restaurants, no new hotels. Very few ever opened. The ones that were there were established. Very few females in the kitchen ever. Portion control, what was that? Profit, what was that? Food margins, what was that? Margins, what was that? Head chefs were always 50, 60 years old, very mature. They'd done their time. Culinary wisdom, knowledge, those things were really important. And the best food was probably in the big hotels. Banqueting was always silver service. Everybody had beards. Kitchens were hidden away, dark, big, huge places. Chefs were revered as tyrants. The word chef means boss, if you actually look it up. So it's all about leadership. Occasionally, but scuffles used to happen between chefs and waiters. It was a very tough military environment to be in, very tribal. The big bosses and management and directors used to have to ask permission to even consider coming into the kitchen. There were no emails, any of that rubbish. It was a very different world, but it's all about great food and trying to progress. And for me, it was about learning. And occasionally motorcycles.